Hey there, anybody home?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Aspen City Council's work session. Luckily on tonight, our work session starts off with our joint meeting with the Board of County Commissioners. And then we have some board and commission interviews in the second half of our meeting. We're going to start off with City Council and BOCC joint work session. We have two items that we're really targeting for discussion tonight. We may have another if their time allows, but really want to focus on two items. The first item is about APSHA guidelines, regulations, and just a conversation to discuss with BOCC what the City Council has talked about. And then the other item we're discussing this evening is somewhat about the unhoused population in Aspen and some of the outreach and what the mechanisms there are for dealing with that population segment. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. This is really directed by members at the table, so we don't have presentation by staff on this. I'm going to actually let Ward kind of take over as he has head up a lot of these discussions. He's our acting representative from City Council to the APSHA board. And again, we just wanted to talk about possible program improvements. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ward.
Thank you.
Did everybody in the BOCC get the packet? It's on page, I think this, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Okay, page 26 is really where this stuff starts. And this is, 26 is a memo that we used at a work session in January to bring up some of the issues that we have mutual concerns over. And since the city and the county make up 2 voting members and basically all of the funding for APSHA, and in the past, my experience has been that at least the city council hasn't been fully engaged in the issues, and don't know to what level the BOCC has, but would really like us all to have input that we can bring to APSHA. So let's start off with a general discussion on AMI. AMI varies throughout the state, different costs of living and different incomes for different regions within the state. And our housing categories for APSHA are all based on AMI. And there's a chart in here with rental rates for different levels of AMI and some disparities within those rental rates. Am I missing something?
No, I probably should have started with the other item first, but,
We all got the clue.
all right, sounds good. All right, thank you. Sorry, Ward.
We've discussed, and I want to know how the county commissioners feel about making some adjustments. And if you look at the chart, there's a huge disparity between percentage of AMI dedicated to income or dedicated to housing. And generally 30% is considered housing burden, and anything over 30% it should be avoided. And we can look at this chart that's on page 27 of our packet tonight. You can see some people are paying as low as, versus 43% for the people in category 1 that are the ones that are the lowest income. And I think that Town of Snowmass Village has thrown out AMI as a gauge, and they just have a set price for their rentals. And I'm just curious how the rest of the elected officials feel about having rent tied to a percentage of your AMI. And that, so because it is now, you get if you're a category 3, two bedroom, regardless of where you are in that spread of the AMI, you could have 8% change, 8% delta between your AMI for housing. So that the idea would be that we set a number, say 28 or 30% of AMI is the maximum that you're going to be paying for rent. And instead of having it one set rate for one category. And so maybe to start off the discussion with that.
And so, and I want to add a little bit more to it. As it's listed here, these are just suggestions of ideas for program improvement. When we talk about, for example, this of connecting to AMI instead of category, there's other ways to skin the cat, as people say, right? It's possible that we take our current categories and actually divide them into 2 categories per. That's another way to do it. Because one of the issues that we're facing is that people that are at the high end of the range of a category are having a different experience than those at the bottom of. So there's one way you could do it is tie it to AMI. Another way you could do it is create categories within the existing categories. There's other ways to do this. We're just trying to talk with you about some of the overall concepts that we see as could be possibly improved. This also has other ramifications. For example, if there was our ability to true up the rental categories and revenue, if you will, there's an opportunity perhaps for greater revenue from rental properties. And I'm not saying something exorbitant, obviously not looking at profit, but more of a break even, more of the opportunity for sustainable and maintenance of our housing stock, right? So there's different ramifications that come from the suggestion that Ward is bringing forward, which is a truing up, if you will, of what people are paying for their rents. And then, like I said, in the packet that was distributed, there's a couple other categories of discussion that we're gonna have, but this is just the opening one.
Tori?
Yep,
Well,
go to Patty.
It just seems to me that because of all the confusion we have sometimes surrounding APSHA, that maybe the best thing to do is make it simple. And I think tying it to AMI at 28% or 30 across the board makes it simple. And in saying that, I also want to add that in looking at maybe increasing the amount of rent some people have to pay, I'm hoping that APSHA is also looking at the income caps, because we're trying to get people to earn more money in our community, and then we're punishing them when they earn too much to live in rental housing. So we need to get up to speed with what people are getting paid these days in order to accommodate any increases that we might have in their rent. Thank you.
Thank you. Francie?
So Tori, are you thinking that one of the places where we could make APSHA more sustainable? Sorry about that. Are you thinking that one of the places where we could make APSHA more sustainable would be at the higher end category, that those rents are significantly less per percent than the lower ones, and therefore could pay for themselves a little bit more? I mean, if you're making $240,000, you could be helping sustain APSHA a little bit more.
I think that's one of the places. You know, as Patty was just talking about, the income cap restrictions that we have on the different categories are also prohibiting people from earning more, perhaps. And so by moving to a different system, we could also perhaps find greater efficiency in people staying housed. But yes, ultimately, what you said was correct. I think that there are opportunities, and if you look at the heat map that we supplied, there are areas where people are paying way less than, you know, what we look at that housing burden. Again, you know, this is a very difficult topic to touch on. It's never a great idea to suggest raising rents, but we're looking at an overall program that is short on sustainability and maintenance, and that's what we're seeing. And we're also seeing this program at its time in place, right? 40, 50 years, some of these units were constructed ago. And so we know that the longevity is becoming more and more a factor.
It's an issue.
But yes, to answer your question, yes, I think there's opportunity.
And then one of the other things that I thought made sense was if somebody has increased their income to the point where they have to leave their apartment, that perhaps instead of leaving their apartment, they could pay more for that apartment in order to have the right to stay in it.
That's one thought. And then there's other, and this is where I'm not really clear on the guidelines, but for example, there are some units that are for rent that have 2-bedroom, but the cap on a 2-income household is so low. It's just interesting that there might be opportunity there as well for people to not get capped out of renting a 2-bedroom unit if they were both paying per AMI or a different categorization, if you will. So I think there's a couple different opportunities perhaps.
Francie, we had this discussion, and Matthew had some input on it, that's bullet point number 2 on.
Yeah.
And APSHA has made some adjustments in their categories. We had some people that were priced out of their category 2, they get a raise, they have to go to category 3. So how do you handle that? And the first one is equity. How should everybody be, why should somebody pay 12%, somebody else pay 38%? You know, that trying to find equity there. And if you raise rent for some people so that they're closer to the AMI, and that would put money into the program to help subsidize the people that are paying over 30% or higher categories. So it's an equity question of trying to make it so it's fair for everybody. And, you know, had discussions about, well, if you are in a project that has development that only has category 2 and 3, and you're priced out on 3, you're forced to move because you don't qualify anymore, but you do have a year to move. But perhaps we should have so that the categories can change, and when another unit becomes available, they could be a little bit flexible instead of cast in stone. And I'm trying to identify what the problems are is one thing, but then coming up with solutions is maybe what we hand over to staff to identify the problems. And because I have a tendency of saying, well, this is a problem, this is how we can fix it. But staff usually comes up with different and probably better ideas.
Yeah, I used to go to every meeting, and I got frustrated sometimes because we spent so much time going over the same wording of, I mean, there would be slight changes, but I just felt like we're constantly rewriting these regulations, and the changes are so minuscule compared to this suggestion, for instance, that I thought, I think I'm not going to go to every meeting as an alternate, you know, it's just got really frustrating. And I do think that making some changes like the ones that you've suggested will take quite a bit of time at the board level, but could be really worth it.
I think it might be a lot of time at the staff level.
Well, definitely that.
You
But
know
just
what?
the discussions.
But Francie, and thank you, that's the input that we're looking for, right? Is like, is there interest in this? Is this something that people share, thinking that maybe there's something here? We're definitely not looking to come up with these solutions tonight, but just to know if you guys feel the same way that we do, you know?
It is shocking when you look at somebody who's making hardly any money paying 43% of their income, and then somebody who's making considerably more money paying 9%. It's
Yeah, it
like,
just
well,
seems
this is not
very,
right.
very wrong.
Yeah,
We need to work on it.
yeah.
Thanks. Sam or Bill, did you want to add anything into this first point?
I'll just basically reiterate what I said when we talked about it last time, is there's a ton of complexity and challenge in implementation on this. Clearly, there's some issues here. But I personally have an interest in having staff present to us some alternative ways of approaching rental rates, and welcome that. I'm not going to propose solutions myself. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, alternative rental rates and then making sure people aren't punished for increasing their income, I think is really the biggest and easiest thing that you could do almost immediately.
Yeah, I think from our work session in January that Matthew kind of allayed my concerns that the categories had been adjusted so that people weren't being priced out of their housing.
You mean some of the higher end ones, the higher end percents were adjusted so that those people could,
I think it was more in the lower ends that, you know, somebody's a lifty and they get a raise, and now they can't be in their category 2. And there are no more category 2s in their development. So,
Go up to 3.
yeah, so you adjust what those, APSHA, I think, is adjusted what those levels are.
and moving in and of itself is a pain.
Yeah,
It's really disruptive
yeah.
And costly.
So,
and costly, yeah.
so if we look at that for a directive to staff to look at ways that if you do get priced out, that you don't have to move, say, a category 2, somebody's living in there with that should be a category 3. When a category 3 somewhere else becomes available, maybe that turns into a category 2. So that the number of units, but then it's complicated because they're all different managers and.
And approvals.
Yeah.
Some of them are approved with those categories needing to be in place and stuff, so, absolutely. I'm gonna just say, Steve, Kelly, or Greg, if you guys have any input. No comment is just taking that you enjoy the conversation direction and somewhat you support the ideas that have been out here. Steve?
So I like what I'm hearing on making adjustments. It's really the humane way to do it, to not kick people out of their housing. Maybe the one guideline would be if they were being forced to do a Category 3, but there aren't any Category 3s available, then in that case, they could stay in their house. When a Category 3 becomes available, then I would rather have them have the option to move into that and not be forced to move into it. But the more flexibility and being humane really with our residents and our workers here, that would be for me the best goal. And it sounds like we have some good ideas for achieving that here in this, in terms of the rent versus their income level.
I think that if we talk about moving categories around, and you have different management companies that are collecting the rents, and we have, like APSHA has what these maximum rental rates are. So just throw this out from 30,000 feet. What if you're renting a two-bedroom Category 3 that you're guaranteed that you're going to get $1,873, that's your rent that you're going to get. And if somebody's paying a lower, somebody's paying higher, the person that is managing that property knows that they're going to get that rent, and how they get it. I mean, it opens a lot of complexity. But
The whole thing is hugely complex because of the different units with all, every sort of a unit is different than every other one probably. Would take a pretty sophisticated computer program to keep track of it all.
Thanks, Steve. Greg, we've kind of mixed in two items here. We're kind of talking about the first two items, which is AMI or rental categories, as well as those income restrictions. Your comments?
Thank you. I really apologize that I'm not there. I tested positive last night, but I'm not there to infect you all. Thank you for having this meeting. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the options, and I'm enjoying hearing the discussion. My concerns certainly are the complexity of it. I don't want to be creating incentives for people to figure out how to skirt the rules. If they reach the top of their income and start having to work for cash, which I think is probably an incentive, and it certainly has happened. That's just an uncomfortable thing to think that we might be unintentionally incentivizing something like that. But I think I'll leave it at that for now. But I'm grateful that you're considering all the alternatives, and I'm sure there'll be more. And I can't wait to hear what Kelly has to say.
Kelly, do you care to add anything to those first topics?
Yeah, I guess I would say that this is an issue that has, I think, long been on the horizon for the APSHA board to address. It's come up a little bit differently in conversation. Those conversations have discussed more related to affordability. As perhaps a metric for how rates get set and categories get defined rather than AMI. And so I would like APSHA's expertise to very much inform any future direction for a change in regulations. And I think what would be useful out of this conversation would be some problem definition as to, the kind of scope of questions that were problems that we see that we would like to have solved. Because I think that there could be a variety of ways to approach that. And, some of my reaction to, some of this conversation is, we have people who on paper may say like, yeah, I look like a category 4, but I'm putting 2 kids through college and you're not taking into account like what my actual cash flow is to pay. We have a lot of different conversations that come up like that. And so, I just think we would have to really be clear about what is it that we're trying to solve. If it's equity, then that is one way to define the problem. And I think we could clearly hone in on that. If it is, letting people stay in units, then those are going to generate different solutions. And I think that is where we should sort of base this conversation around. I don't like, do we want to sort of see how similarly this stuff works to how a market works? Because a lot of people who are paying high-end rental rates, many of them are not paying 30% of their income, right? They are paying 9%. Like they just make more money. And, so I don't know if adjusting for that is the appropriate answer either. I have long thought that we should be having more regular assessment and adjustment within the inventory. And what that might look like for me is, what are the spreads of incomes that we are seeing in the community? What are the spreads of incomes that we are seeing in our reapplications? And how are our inventories matching that? I think we have the opportunity to be more flexible in how we assign units, which is a little bit of the solution I'm hearing here, in that, if someone makes more money, just let them pay more money. That might be fine, but maybe we need to be thinking about this a bit more holistically across the system. This also shows up in ownership units. Some of the really old units go for sale and they are like markedly below what the category rate is for that category, and yet that's what they sell for. So I do think we should look at how responsive we're being to the actual conditions in the system and figuring out a good way to assess what's happening so that we can be more flexible with the inventory. So that's a bit of my reaction right now. I would love, like, I think we would have had better benefit if this had been a joint meeting with APSHA also, because I think there's a lot of thought that's already gone into this and a lot of experience that the APSHA staff hears from people who are applying for and either losing housing or qualifying for rental housing that we would benefit from greatly.
Thank you.
No, I was going to say it's too bad that Cindy or Brittany and some of those people aren't here to help us understand some of these tables, why they look so disparate to us, I was looking at the going from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom in category 6. That only costs you $30. But if you're in category 1, it costs you $90 to have one more bedroom. There's probably a rhyme and reason behind it, because that's probably why they said it this way, but it is surprising. And so I do think conversation with the staff would help a lot.
And that's probably, from our view, is the next step. Is we really just want, APSHA is a joint organization, and so we just want to check in with you guys before. I guess next step will really be to take this to the board to see if they want to kind of engage staff to start working on this, and that would be APSHA board direction. So.
Yeah, and to address Kelly's comments about the sale units, if you look at that heat map, there's some big disparities in sale units, particularly between category 4 and 5. I think there's a big spread, percentage increase. So this is kind of, these points I've pointed out so far are more on the rental side. We have more control on rentals than we do on sale units, but once you sell a unit, it's in those people's hands for a long time. So they're locked into their purchase price. So that's something to look at too.
Sarah?
It may be of interest to the BOCC that City Council authorize a rental rate study for the city-owned rental APSHA product that they oversee. And we are working on that RFP with an alternative that would allow the APSHA board to extend it to their inventory that is outside of the City of Aspen-owned units. So just to let you know that we have some of those similar questions about how did we get to this point on some of these differences. And it is quite honestly, there's a number of cases where we're charging less than HUD. And we're trying to figure out why is that? How has our formula been enough different from HUD's that our rents are pretty incongruent with the federal policy?
Thanks for that.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, well, thank you again for the input on that. Ward, let's move on to another topic of conversation.
Question 3 is an age limit for what is considered a full-time dependent for a college student. And APSHA changed that from, I think, 24 to 19 a couple of years ago with the intention of utilizing inventory, utilizing rooms. So what it creates is a situation where somebody has a child that is a full-time student, and they're only spending 3 months a year in housing, and they fall into that category at age 19. And just curious if, I think, Patty, you were probably on the board when that was changed, the age was changed, and,
Agree with it.
I'm sorry?
I did not agree with it.
Yeah, so curious how the city council and the board of county commissioners feel about having a matching age between the IRS and APSHA for full-time students.
Which is 19?
19 for APSHA, and I think it's somebody else, probably
What's for the feds?
24th.
That's your insurance coverage. You can still insure your child
Up to 26.
up to 26, I think. Yeah, and so there's some likeness there. My concern was more about 19. Some kids are still in college. So still in high school. So I don't know if there's an appeal to this, or disabled children. There's an appeal for that because they need to still be living at home. And it's just for qualifications, right? You don't get thrown out because your kid goes off to college.
Well, you're no longer qualified if you don't have minimum occupancy.
So if I'm living in my place and it's got 3 bedrooms and my kids go to school, I have to move and then they come home to a studio?
Well,
Think
if you're in
about
a rental program, that's what the regulations say, that you have to have a minimum occupancy.
Rental being different from
Yeah.
purchased.
Yeah, purchase, you're locked in.
And whereas if the age was a higher age, they would be qualified as maintaining a bedroom in that household still.
Right.
So that's kind of the question. I got a hand up from Kelly. I'll go to Kelly next.
Thank you.
Thanks. And there might be some consideration here for how this operates differently in the rental process versus the ownership process. Some of the consideration,
She has kids she wishes would go off to college.
not quite, I just wish they'd be quiet, So how this operates differently, the consideration was that when people are like entering into the lottery, and are gonna be in an ownership unit for the foreseeable future, would their, would their college-bound children count towards a larger unit? So with someone who is, right now, it's 19, so when your kids are, 19 or less, you can bid on a unit and they can count towards the bedroom count for maximum occupancy.
For purchase.
Whereas if they were 25, should they be able to count for a bedroom count for maximum occupancy when, they're ostensibly not going to be living there and now somebody's living as a couple in a 4-bedroom house or something. So that, perhaps we didn't pay enough attention to how this operated in the rental market at the time. But there just might be some consideration for how this works differently in the rental process versus the ownership process. And I can understand how there's concern about, if there's nowhere to move in the rental inventory, that family could have to be forced out after their 2-year requalification process comes back up.
So I'm curious if there's support from the BOCC and City Council to bring this in front of APSHA for a discussion again.
Yes.
Steve?
Yeah, I thought of another situation which I don't know if it is applicable, and maybe there's another APSHA rule that deals with it, but in the case, if someone were in the National Guard and they were called to duty, and their spouse was still living in the unit here, that would be a similar situation where, a family member is temporarily away, but this is still their home address. And I think in both of those cases, the college student or someone called away, more or less involuntarily to do their national duty, that they still qualify for their unit without having to move.
Francie?
Thank you. I remember talking about this since I've been on the board, and at the time, I thought 19 was incredibly young for this particular thing. I mean, we've all lived together, my family, well into when they were married. And the fact is, this is the Roaring Fork Valley. A 20-year-old kid who wants to come back here can't get a place to live, And even when they're 25, for most of them wouldn't be able to find a place to live. So, and I know it's a little different when you live in subsidized housing, but I remember thinking that 19 was incredibly young to not qualify.
Can I add to that? The other thing is that my kids, anyway, came home from college and worked in this community. They came home and had a place to live and were able to work here and fill those jobs that we had open. So I think that's another thing we need to take into consideration. If you come home and you don't work, you shouldn't be living in rental housing. If you come back and you prove that you are going to work, because that's how these kids pay for a lot of their college these days. So they can come home, live with mom and dad, which is, I wish you would tell them they had to stay in, say, Durango, but not have to pay rent and all that in Durango to stay there because they had no place to go.
Sounds like a yes to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to have it come back and have a further discussion, please.
Okay. Question number 4 is something that I think has been kicked around in this community for many years, and it's never really been, to my knowledge, seriously considered by APSHA, and that's incentivizing right sizing.
Wow.
It's City Council's goals on housing, and 2 of them include, one of them is maximize utilization of the number of rooms in the inventory. And the last one, I think that was the impetus for that change, but we don't want to have a lot of spare bedrooms sitting around. If we can house people in those spare bedrooms, we have a great deal to gain. And to incentivize it, we have a right sizing program that's voluntary. It has been a little bit successful at APSHA as a pilot program. But the idea of having basically what it's going to be the city and the county funding a program to right size and incentivize with a monetary value to gain a bedroom. That if somebody is in a sale, they own a unit that's a three-bedroom, and it's a single, only one person's living in it, they have two spare bedrooms. If they were to move into a smaller unit, that there would be a monetary value associated that they would get, whether it's, you know, for this memo, I said, for example, $100,000 to gain a bedroom. If you look what it costs to build housing, you know, $1 million for a unit is.
At least.
Yeah, so that if we could incentivize this, and also if you leave the program, if you voluntarily move out, do you get a monetary incentive for that? So this would be.
As a retired person or as a working person?
Either way, either if you leave, if there's an incentive for somebody to leave the system and move to Maine or Grand Junction.
Or the free market. Could I add one thing, Warren?
Yeah.
The intention is not that this is a permanent thing necessarily. So don't think of this, I would advise not to think of this from the beginning as a permanent solution. Perhaps there's a certain amount of funds that are earmarked for this effort, and we can see how it goes. I don't know that, you know, we're clearly at a critical point right now where freeing up bedrooms and freeing up units would help this community a lot. I don't know if that will be the condition forever or not. So I think I would advise thinking about this in the framework of this is a temporary sort of pilot program, give a shot of steroids to the right sizing concept that's been established, see how it goes.
Real quick before your comment, Sarah, I think in our last maybe evaluation about unoccupied bedrooms in our program, I want to say that it came back to us at about 10%, perhaps.
I can provide that information at tomorrow's regular meeting. I don't know that fact off the top of my head. Maybe one of the APSHA board members would know that, though, because there's a lot more discussion of that at their meetings.
Do you remember what that was stated at? I thought
Vacant
it was-
bedrooms in the
Yeah,
inventory?
I thought we gave it somewhere around the ballpark of 10%, which is about 300 units, or 300 bedrooms is, no, that's not correct, because that's units. Anyway, I know that we did look at it through, APSHA took a look at it, but I don't know. Patty?
Yeah, I think this is something to look at, definitely. I just think that the county needs to be brought into discussion because we don't have a fund. So we would have to think broader as to what we're going to cut in order to fund this. So I'm looking at John Peacock. We don't have a fund to support a program like this at this time. We'd have to be creative. He's going to come up and say yes.
Yes, we'd have to be creative. It'd probably be general fund, housing impact funds can be used for
Okay,
these.
thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Kelly? Hang on, that's okay, hang on one second. Sarah, did you have a piece of input?
The texting gods told me it's 500 bedrooms. They don't know off the top of their head what the percentage of total bedrooms that is.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Is that
Texting
both rental
gods.
and,
I think that's full inventory,
thanks.
based upon the last census that APSHA did.
Awesome, thank you for that. So, you know, we're not talking about small time. There's a lot of bedrooms out there. They are, I'm sure, have different circumstances. Kelly, go right ahead.
Yeah, I would be open to thinking along the lines of what Bill was saying. I'm a little concerned, you know, I think we'd have to think of like, what is the quality of this unit? What are the capital reserve issues related to this unit? You know, to give someone $300,000 for a 3-bedroom that a family might move into and have to do significant work is a little challenging for me. So I think there might need to be better criteria. But I would be open to exploring how this might work.
Thank you, Kelly. Any other, yep, go ahead, John.
No, I just want to say this is a key component of development neutral, which is going to save us millions of dollars if we can get this to work in a significant fashion.
And
Greg?
Terry?
Greg?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just always trying to think about unintended consequences, and I appreciate Bill's comment also just about it being maybe a trial run. If this becomes a longstanding policy, wouldn't it just become a golden parachute for everybody who decides to move out and head somewhere else? Does it become the standard that we're going to pay X dollars per bedroom for people when they leave? It's not to incentivize them to leave. It just becomes something that happens.
Thank you for that. Any other comments here,
I
Patty?
think Bill answered that question. We just do like a pilot program, set amount of money and see how it works. But I just wanted to thank you guys. I think these are all good topics to bring up for discussion. So thank you for your time and energy.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that if this were a success and everybody wanted to do it, we're talking $50 million here. So if the number's really 500, so just to keep that in mind.
But again, we can say we're allocating $5 million, $10 million, and you know, how we figure out the cost sharing is to be determined, of course. And then it's either a lottery system or a first come, first served system to apply. And to Kelly's point, which was a very thoughtful point, you know, no one's forcing that buyer to buy that specific unit. If they think that unit requires too much capital investment, they don't need to purchase that specific unit. But hopefully this will free up more inventory so people do have choices and they're not, it's the, you know, this way or the highway kind of situation that they're in right now. But yeah, again, I think we can establish some parameters around this and see how it works, and make sure that we don't create unintended consequences.
Yeah, and in spite of that really high price tag, it is a lot cheaper than building new units.
For sure.
And just to toss this out, that there are livability standards that have to be met when you sell a unit, so you have some kind of guardrails on that. And absolutely, I think from what I'm hearing is to bring this before APSHA as a trial and setting a period or a monetary amount as a maximum input and to see how it works out.
Sounds like everybody is interested in filling as many bedrooms as possible, and that this is a program that may have some merit to it. Kelly?
I would say, I think the discussions at the APSHA board have, APSHA will spend the money, great, but I think that there's been more of an interest in kind of a stepped piloting of this. So would we get more people if we paid for movers? Would we get more people if we gave $10,000 instead of $100,000? So there might just be more thought that goes into where is that? Is there a sweet spot? Where might that be? How long might we test something for before pulling the next trigger?
Absolutely. That is the work that you will be pursuing. Thank you for that. Other comments on this question or topic? Ward, did you have another item?
Well, there's an item that we discussed, pardon me, at our work session that didn't make it on this, and it didn't make it for our memo, and that's, there are different numbers of full-time employment. The APSHA is $1,500. I think Snowmass Village is $1,400. Vail is $1,560. So, and I think this has come before APSHA board before, but how do we as these two governing bodies feel about $1,500? Is that a good number? Given the kind of economy we have and the kind of workers we have and the seasonal nature of our economy, is $1,500 the right number?
And just to make it a little simpler, that's 50 weeks at 30 hours a week.
That's what I was going to ask.
And then just to add to it, there was also this also spurred a little bit further conversation. For example, volunteer hours. Giving credit for volunteer hours in the community. I think right now there's the ability for a student to ask for a waiver of some amount of hours if they are in school. But should there also be other waivers for other types of service that people do in our community? This has been an issue that I've been talking about for some time because over the last couple of years, I've run into folks, for example, it was, I think, last year that there were folks that were working at the Hotel Jerome. And the Jerome let their employees know that they were going to be closed for 2 full months in the fall, but they were also closed for a month in the spring, basically taking away about 14 to 15 weeks of work availability for even their full-time staff. And so that was a position that these people for that year would not be qualifying. That just got me thinking about others that were in this position. And the conversation that I've heard around is really that it's not that 1,500 is so onerous, it's that there are certain years that maybe you don't make that. And this, again, is just an issue in an area of housing insecurity for people. So again, we're just asking you, at our last work session, Ward was volunteering to get more information from Vail. Why did they set theirs at 1,560? From Snowmass, from Basalt, who also, I believe, is set at 1,400 and the like. So again, this is just that conversation. Is there any interest, from the county commissioners in how they see this issue? Patty?
Yeah, I think there should be. I mean, 1560, so they go for 52?
Exactly, 52 hours.
So you
at
don't get a
30 hours.
vacation. Sorry, guys, you got to work all the time. And I think the circumstances, there should be some special circumstance you have no control over.
Like the pandemic.
Well, I think the pandemic,
They were very lenient during pandemic, but I'll give you, one thing that came out of the pandemic was folks that had family members that were sick and they needed to go tend to some family members and might have, had to take time off of work. So there's different components to this. The overall question is just about how that 1,500 is set and how we look at it, so.
yeah, I think it's worth looking at some exceptions to the rule with some parameters. Because, things happen in people's lives and we need to be sensitive to that.
It's my feeling that it would be advantageous to all parties if we had the same number of hours in this.
All about it.
Yeah. Well, at least in our valley.
Thank you.
I'm open to exploring the volunteer concept, but not open to changing the number of hours required.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Volunteer hours, would be important to define very well what that would entail. I'm thinking of Lee Mulcahy building his house and wanting to count those hours towards his 1,500 hours, and he wasn't allowed to. That was a different situation. It wasn't volunteer hours, but counting, how you count the hours is important.
Yeah, and Steve, and again, because all these are so complex, for example, somebody who is working a job but is trying to start maybe another career, maybe start another job, how do they balance that workload and get credit for that kind of thing? So I think that there's more examples that can be given. It's really about that overall policy that we just want to know if you guys think about this or look at this at all. So, Francie.
I think 1,500 hours is a little bit onerous. Understand why you think it should be that, Bill, but like if you're working 40 hours a week, you get a 2-week vacation, assuming that you're not counting the holidays, national holidays and stuff. If you're paid by the hour and you're working 40 hours a week, you have to work 38 weeks. So that's asking a lot. And so I'd be willing to look at altering it a little bit.
Thanks.
I have no idea how many people are asking for it. We hear this anecdotally. That's what I hear up here. I'd rather make exceptions to the rule than through an appeal process rather than change the rule entirely, because I think the rule is just fine. I think there should be an appeal process for more than just this. I think you can put together a citizen or an APSHA board to listen to someone's story as to why they couldn't make 1,500 hours. But if we're talking about like 5 people that work at the Jerome, then I don't know why we need to make a whole new rule for it rather than just make exceptions.
I'm not just talking about 5 people at the Jerome. I'm talking about everybody that works in any hotel or any restaurant or teaches skiing on our hill. I'm talking about probably a majority of our affordable housing residents.
It's anecdotal to me, though. I have no idea how Maine
Yeah,
has.
you might not. You might not.
So
I get it.
just to try to clarify in my mind, going along what Sam is saying, they had to leave the 1,500 hours but define exceptions, or to add voluntary hours or service hours as part of that 1,500?
Add volunteer hours, but if you're a Hotel Jerome employee and the Jerome's closed for 2 months, you go in front of the APSHA board and be like, I couldn't get my hours because the Jerome was closed for 2 months. And the APSHA board makes a decision.
And/or do something else during those 2 months. When
Yeah, hopefully, because you have to hit 1,500 hours. I mean, you don't need to just sit around for 2 months, too.
They're probably not sitting around, they're probably skiing.
Yeah. Or they are working, or, you know.
working to pay
But
the bills.
anyway, I mean, I think maybe I have a sensitivity to this as somebody who's been in affordable housing for 2 decades and more, so. You know, I appreciate it. I think what I'm hearing here is that there is, you know, the opportunity to take this to the APSHA board and continue this conversation. Kelly?
Thank you. Yeah, again, I think this is a conversation that would benefit from APSHA staff participation. I think there's going to be a particular sensitivity to making a change along these lines. And that, you know, there are plenty of people who can easily prove 1,500 hours and more who need housing, and are applying for housing. And, you know, APSHA is trying to like streamline and make a process fair for everyone. Something like volunteer hours is very fungible. And, you know, I think if for it to not be a complete, just flash conversation, that there should be some consideration about a cap to that, you know, like 2% or something. I mean, something really low, because there is a lot of demand from people who can like provide W-2s, you know, show 2,000 hours of work, et cetera. And I just would I'm just going to play the counterpoint here on that. I don't think we should spend a ton of energy on this, on a change like this.
I appreciate that. You know, I think that information from the other entities around our valley and why they've set theirs at their position would be helpful to this conversation. You know, once again, I think that
Sorry.
this.
Can I say one more thing I forgot?
Yeah, sure.
I think it also would be helpful that APSHA explain like the processes that are currently in place to accommodate some of these exceptional circumstances. I mean, there are, you know, they look at sometimes, I think they look at rolling averages over 2 years when they're qualifying renters. They have a, you know, a leave of absence opportunity for someone who may need to leave and take care of a family member or have a broken leg during ski season, or those kind of accommodations already exist. So it might help us to all understand exactly what people can avail themselves of before trying to target a regulatory change.
Thank you. I think those were the topics that we wanted to bring in front of you to get your input on.
Thank you.
Good. To the BOCC, are there any other comments that you want to make on any of these housing, or is there something that we missed, or is there something else that you're thinking about perhaps?
Well, I'd like to say thank you for a very well-organized presentation, Ward. That was really great, very efficient. I appreciated that.
Oh, gee, Francie, thank you.
Got to win points with you, Eric.
Get an A from the school teacher.
Kelly?
No, thank you. I just wanted to highlight, perhaps this has already come up in our separate boards, but the APSHA board has awarded the RFP for the capital reserve study, which both of our boards, agreed as a top priority for all the issues in the housing inventory, that this one was most important to us when we all met last summer. So I'm looking forward to the progress on that and to having all of us sort of work through what the outcomes are going to be of that study.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Ward.
I just want to make mention that Allison Bektesh is here in the audience. She is a current seated member of the APSHA board. I didn't want to bring you into this conversation, as this was just kind of work and discussion around, and you will see these things in your role on the board. So, but thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate it. With that, we will move into our second topic for our joint meeting with the BOCC. This is around the unhoused. The reason that we're bringing this up is we've had some council member questions for our city manager and our city organization about, the folks that we all encounter and see downtown, and many of us have come to know and enjoy them in our community. But we want to know that their health and safety is being taken care of, and make sure that the way that we are handling them is appropriate. And we recognize that the county has a role in that. So really, we requested that we get together to talk about this, because we just want to know how we're handling the unhoused population in the city and obviously in the county as well.
Well, thank you, Mayor. If there are questions Sarah couldn't answer, I think we're done here, but I'll just start off with a bit of quick background. I'm John Peacock, the county manager. We have not prepared a presentation, but we do have folks here at the table who we hope can provide the insight that you're looking for with your questions. Next to me is Lindsay Maish. She is our Director of Human Services. On the phone, or on the Zoom, I guess I just showed my age there. On Zoom, we have Janelle Duhan, who is the Executive Director of Recovery Resources, who is a contractor for both our detox services and homeless services. Just quick history on this and kind of those roles. Detox, this was originally agreement that was entered into with what was Mine Springs, or West Mountain Regional Health at the time. Is that right? West Mountain, we're going back a number of names, which is now Mine Springs. In 2014, all the partners that we see today, Aspen Valley Hospital, City of Aspen, Pickens County, Snowmass Village, and Basalt entered into an intergovernmental agreement because we were not receiving the services in the detox, which was located in Glenwood Springs. It was a 2-bed detox run by our behavioral health organization at the time. At that time, when we exited that agreement in Garfield County, with Garfield County, we looked to fund a detox up here. The county stepped up to be the fiscal agent, basically, and what that means is we pooled the dollars for the partners and took responsibility for overseeing the contract. At that time, we contracted with the exact same provider we had down in Glenwood Springs, but locally. That lasted roughly until about 2017. The partners felt that we should go out for a bid process, and as a result of that bid process, we changed to our current vendor, Recovery Resources, and I'll let Janelle talk about the services here. We originally had an agreement that divided costs by a fairly simple yet complicated formula all at the same time, and it was based on population of each jurisdiction, number of liquor licenses issued by each jurisdiction, and then the previous year's utilization of the detox by each jurisdiction. After a number of years, we found that there was some stability, frankly, in those numbers, and recently, our most recent intergovernmental agreement that was signed by all entities just set it at a straight percentage. City of Aspen is 27% of that total, $189,000. Pickens County is 25% of that total, $175,000, but we do provide the facility as in kind. Housing, similar situation. We had a nonprofit who is providing homeless services for us. That nonprofit basically went out of business. They closed their doors in 2022 in a really almost an emergency response. We stepped up, gathered the same partners really to the table to see if we could fund. Everyone was funding that nonprofit at some level through grant programs. I'm sorry.
So good. I just wanted to jump in quickly because I wanted you to go back a little bit about detox.
Yes.
Can you explain what detox is? Like, what's the role of detox in the conversation that we're having? What is detox? Is detox when somebody gets arrested, or there's, you know what I mean? Like, when is detox?
All right, I'll come back to housing. Janelle, I am going to punt to you to talk a little bit about the social detox and to answer Mayor's question.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Janelle Duhan. Detox is considered withdrawal management, and it's someone under the influence of drugs or alcohol and or someone in severe withdrawal. And it's self-admit, it's voluntary. We get our admits from law enforcement, from the hospital. People walk up to our door, they call us. So it doesn't really matter what drug will take someone. And it's also just based on the two criteria: under the influence, drugs and alcohol, or just in severe withdrawal. They can be sober, but experiencing withdrawal, and we can help them.
Okay, so it doesn't
answer
take,
your question?
it doesn't, yes, it does. It doesn't take an interaction with law enforcement to get you there. It could be several different paths, even just walking up, but it is voluntary.
And even if there is an interaction with law enforcement, and I know we have some experts in the room here, an individual cannot be held in detox. It is voluntary. So to be there.
Thank you. That answered my question. Yeah, I just didn't really know when.
Yeah, no,
when
thank you,
detox was
Mayor.
deployed.
I've been working with it for so long now. I just assume everyone knows that. So I appreciate you taking a step back.
I definitely did.
Tori, question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, John, if you could just elaborate a little bit on the nonprofit that handled the housing for so long and where they did it.
Are you okay if I go back to the housing piece?
Yeah, I guess we're
Mayor?
switching
Okay.
topics.
I don't want to jump around, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm not as well organized as Ward in his presentation. So on the housing, it was a homeless shelter nonprofit.
Aspen Homeless Shelter.
Aspen Homeless Shelter. That was provided actually day services in our Schultz Health and Human Services building, and then the faith-based community stepped up to provide emergency shelter services in the winter months. Since I've been here, that was Aspen Chapel, and I believe St. Mary's had done it before that. I believe the Episcopal Church had stepped up a little bit there too to provide facilities, and then those services were managed through the nonprofit. We had a day center in our Schultz Health and Human Services building that provided basically a warming area, laundry, and connection to the nonprofit staff.
And that is not available currently?
They went out, and so in March 2022, we stepped in as a county to, again, provide fiscal agent services, pooled funding from partners, and we contracted with Recovery Resources also to provide emergency shelter services. Those emergency shelter services are provided in our Schultz Health and Human Services building, along with the Resiliency Center, where we provide case management, warming, laundry, those sorts of things. And those are the services that we want to talk to you about today, along with the rehousing efforts that we have in place. Currently, that funding is through AVH, Town of Snowmass Village, and Pickens County for the homeless services.
Questions?
John, if I could just follow up with one quick one, Mayor Tory, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
I just wanted to say that it might be a good time to circle back. I'm thinking specifically about the Aspen Chapel. I know that they are looking at alternatives and options for what they have moving forward with the use of that building. And it might be a good opportunity to circle back with them. And we can do the rest of that offline. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Patty?
I'm good. I'll speak
Sam.
up later.
I was wondering what happened and what we can do as far as having a homeless camp back out at the Intercept lot. I've talked to people who thought that was such a better system to have consolidation over there for that issue.
Well, I think we, and I may jump to Janelle a little bit to talk about the services that we are providing. We set up the safe outdoor space in the Brush Creek Intercept lot during COVID as an emergency response. It's not a use that's anticipated right now. In the Brush Creek Intercept lot, that doesn't mean it couldn't be in the future at the direction of frankly, these policy boards and the agreement of CDOT. We did not ask for permission before setting that up during COVID. We treat it as an emergency. I think it'd be a different conversation now. It also had fairly intensive oversight needs and some challenges, quite frankly, in terms of managing the population that we would probably need to revisit a little bit. Lindsay, do you have anything you'd want to add there?
No, it's just, we've looked into it quite a bit, and it's pretty complicated, just the way to use that lot and how, and like John said, I think for all the municipalities to come together, it would really take kind of a pretty big lift, but not impossible.
I would love to work towards that lift. I feel like it was a better option than what's happening now, where Connor Park can be overrun with homeless people. I've talked to women at the thrift shop that get harassed by the homeless. I've talked to people coming off buses that get harassed by the homeless. I know they always say it was a better system when the Intercept lot had the homeless shelter or homeless area, and it was more consolidated and away from downtown, quite frankly. I hope we can offer all the services we can to get these people back on their feet. But if they're not and they're just going to be drunk downtown, I would rather them out at the Intercept lot, and I would encourage the rest of us to work towards that lift.
I'm not sure all the neighbors would agree with you, which is one of our challenges there too. But Janelle, I wonder if you might talk a little bit about the services that we are providing, both for those that are in the emergency shelter, but those that are coming to the Resiliency Center, and then maybe we can revisit the safe outdoor space concepts, because that is something that I know at the staff level we've been interested in seeing if there's an option. Location has been a challenge.
Yeah, that would be much appreciated. I could go on for all the stories that I hear of downtown, and as we approach this upcoming summer, I feel like it's going to become an even greater pressing issue to make sure that we come up with some form of solution for this.
Janelle, do you mind giving an overview of the services that you're providing, both in the emergency shelter and resiliency center?
Yes, John. So we provide bus passes for our clients. We provide case management, in-house case management. We also provide street outreach where our staff are going out to the libraries, to the parks, to talk to the clients. We're also providing clothing. They have access to a computer when they come in the Resilience Center to fill out an application for employment, look for housing, all their needs. We also provide meals. We have a laundry service. The HHS building has allowed all of their mail to be mailed to our building so they can come up, pick their mail up daily. We also provide showers, thrift store vouchers, and also we provide the toiletry kits for all the shower needs that they have. And we also provide that emergency shelter at night. They can check in at 8:15, and we store their stuff in a safe space. And then, of course, we wake them up in the morning. They are allowed to stay in the space to stay warm during the winter. Some of them have jobs, some of them don't. And then they choose to leave in the morning by 7 o'clock.
Janelle, can you speak a little bit to the case management services and any successes in moving folks from the emergency shelter to more permanent housing?
Yes. So we had a total of 264 people walk in our doors from January to December of last year. 120 of them are housed. We were able to find them housing. Of course, it's not in our area, it's down valley. We do have currently 107 unsheltered, and 37 of those particular 264 would not share their data with us. So case managers are working really hard with organizations like Catholic Charities, APSHA. We've got so many different relationships and with organizations in the Roaring Fork Valley to try to find housing. We also have all of our clients on wait list. Wait lists are really long right now. Catholic Charities has the ability to be able to provide vouchers for housing. However, we have clients with vouchers, but there's no housing available. But we did house 120 people last year, so that's great news.
Real quick, Janelle, this is Tori. First of all, some staggering numbers there. 264, that's a lot. Number two, 120 that you managed to get housed is also a lot. So congratulations on tackling a big challenge and having some success there. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
My quick question is, seeing that the county seat and these services are up at this end of the valley, do we feel like there is an unhoused population further down the valley in the county that is not being
Addressed.
addressed?
You want me to answer that, Janelle? I can speak to that, yeah. So there is regional efforts right now around ending homelessness. The Valley Alliance to End Homelessness is right now seated in West Mountain Regional Health Alliance. And they're serving as a backbone organization right now. They've pulled together around $5.2 million to serve just our region, Aspen to Parachute. So there are a lot of efforts happening. What we're seeing happen is, frankly, data infrastructure is starting to stabilize a little bit. We didn't have any, so we didn't know numbers before. We kind of had these point-in-time counts that occur that gave us a very loose sense of what was happening and what the problem actually looked like for the whole valley. And now we're seeing, through some of that data infrastructure standing up, we're starting to really truly see the numbers. Like the fact that Janelle can speak to some of the numbers locally if I was to pull up the point in time counts from 5 years ago, it would have showed us that there were about 25 people here that were chronically homeless, which, as you heard today, that is not the case. So we're starting to really kind of get a better understanding of what's happening, both locally, but also in the whole region. That 5.2 million or $5-something million is going towards building more infrastructure and providing more services. Both locally in Pickens County, but also there's a big push in the Eagle Garfield area too, because there was no infrastructure. Like where we had a homeless shelter and we were doing some of this work already, we were already teed up and ready to provide the service, where they've had a bigger lift in actually getting the services there, finding the vendors, and standing up some of that work. So we're definitely seeing more and more I guess, wraparound case management and support. I think Janelle was speaking to just the kind of the inventory, which where is the inventory? Where do we put folks? We know that in this valley, we do not have a permanent supportive housing project, which is something that that's a program that's used to house chronically homeless individuals, people who are living with disabilities, people who are living with a mental illness or substance use disorder or something like that. There's nowhere for those people to go right now. So there's a big push around finding that solution somewhere in this valley. So we hope to see, in the next 5 years, I would say, some of that start to stand up. But currently what your experience is probably that tension between just starting some of the work and now we'll start seeing some of the benefits over the next few years.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Bill and then Francie.
Thanks. I want to ask this question in a way that I don't come across as not being empathetic, because I am. And I do believe in these services and think that they are important. But I think it's incredibly commendable, like Tori mentioned, that we're able to transfer people from being unhoused to housing secure situations. That's, to me, the goal. But how do you determine what the appropriate balance of services is, such that we don't attract people to our community that otherwise may not even be in our community or are coming to our community or communities in this valley to seek these services because they don't exist elsewhere? So how do we make sure we're not making the problem worse? How do we make sure we're not inheriting someone else's problem? How do you find that balance?
Do you want? Well, so I'll start big picture. I mean, we have some processes where we do try in terms of who's qualified to access our services, but I just want to highlight, what you're saying is it's almost like a tragedy of the commons problem, right? Where because we don't have equitable services established throughout the state, both for our homeless population, and by the way, this logic is going to apply as we have our newcomers who are arriving, as refugees and such to this area. We're seeing it in Denver, same thing. Because we don't have equitable kind of services throughout the state, you can almost be at a disadvantage, right, by stepping up to do the right thing and then getting overwhelmed or maybe attracting more of the issue. And that is a concern to some degree. We've tried to manage still doing the right things while having some boundaries around who can access our services. But I think what's happening is what Sam was referring to earlier. Folks are still coming to the community and staying here even when they can't access all of our services. But Janelle, would you talk a little bit? So I just wanted to highlight, we recognize that same problem, and I know it's a delicate one to bring up. We're still struggling, quite frankly, with those right answers. But Janelle, you talk about some of the procedural processes that you have to try and put boundaries around those services?
Yes, currently, how we have it set up, because we do recognize you build it, they will come. And so we have established, and they have to be a resident or be in this area for at least 90 days. So that's not, so when it comes to services, however, anyone can walk in the door in the Resilience Center, take a shower, wash their laundry. But with our winter overnight shelter, you know, there's a 90-day requirement, but however, we do work with law enforcement in the event there's someone 2 a.m. they found in one of the parks, it's an emergency situation, we take the person in, and then we connect, we then let that person know the next morning, here's our process. So like, we do try to keep them safe during the night. So part of that process with the 90 days is we're required to do an HMIS intake with those clients, and HMIS stands for Homeless Management Information System. It's a whole system that we are required to use to report our data to the state. And so not only do they have to do an intake, we also have to complete a VI SPDAT, which is a vulnerability assessment for our homelessness. So there's a lot of different intake packets that all have to be done. A lot of the clients will refuse and then they leave. But our process now is like the 90 days. So if they've been in our community 90 days, we're going to walk you through this process. You're going to have to fill out this required documentation, and then we'll provide the case management services. We can only do so much. So we can't work harder than the client's willing to work. So we do make sure that they're meeting us in the middle and they're attending those meetings, whether it's with APSHA or with Passcode Charities, things like that. So that's kind of our boundaries is we've established is that 90 days.
And Janelle, just two follow-up questions around the question that was just asked. One, can you talk about how many, we have about 1,500 square feet of our Health and Human Services building that's roughly in play for providing these services. Can you talk about how many beds that provides, and are we oversubscribed or undersubscribed in those beds?
So we don't use beds anymore. We use mats because unfortunately our clients do come in very intoxicated. Cots, they fall out of cots, they hit their head on the hard floor. So we have resorted to being on the floor with mats and blankets. So we have 15 spots on the floor. And in the event we get someone in the middle of the night, it's 2 a.m. Again, we've had this happen a couple of times where someone was in the area, missed their bus to get to Denver. We took them in and we provide a space for them, and we actually will put them in the hallway for the night, and then they're on their merry way the next day. So I would like to say that we've had 45 unique individuals out of the 264 people utilize the shelter. I have not had a night where I had to turn someone away. So hopefully that answers your question, John.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't think we've overbuilt the services relative to the demand that we're seeing, I guess is what I was getting at.
Great, thanks. And then, one follow-up, not so much a question, but a point along the lines of what Sam was saying is, I think both the county and the city need to, in light of sort of the circumstantial evidence of the behavior and how it's affecting our community, I think we need to change maybe some of our approaches. I know we already are to a certain extent, but I think we need to enhance that and make sure that the behaviors that are impacting us and our visitors and our community members on a daily basis are significantly reduced. So, whether that comes from the police department or the sheriff's department and or some of the other incredible people working in this space, I will not allow Aspen to become like San Francisco or Portland or even some areas of Denver. And whatever it takes to do that, I will fight for. Those behaviors, just, public drug use, public urination, it's leaving trash in our parks and desecrating our beautiful open spaces, to me, are not acceptable solutions. Harassing people, are not acceptable behaviors, I should say. So, realizing that there's been an uptick in that, I think we should all be working together on how to minimize the impacts of that seriously.
Thanks, Bill. Francie, then Patty.
Thank you.
Well, that got me a little lost there. Like, I wasn't aware that that was going on in Aspen. I haven't encountered it myself, but I'm not here at night. I have spent a lot of time with the Venezuelans in Carbondale, and I don't see anything even close to that kind of behavior. I spent a lot of time with these people, and they're very respectful and appreciative and law-abiding, and so having both of you speak to that is a surprise to me. But I would like somebody to speak to the influence of the Venezuelan migrants on the housing problem in the valley, because I met with Colin Thursday for like half an hour or something. And he said that, first of all, there are weekly meetings about it between, I think, some of you guys and some people from Carbondale. And secondly, that they're down to, they're housing only 40 plus a little bit of people. And I said, well, where's everybody else? And he said, well, a lot of them are in Pitkin County and have gone up Valley. And so I'm just wondering where that all is.
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're starting to see more impacts. And so we, did support Carbondale initially with some supplies, cots, which they are using in their shelters there. We supplied roughly about 90 over the course of their response. But as they've gone to the 2 dispersed shelters, they did lose beds. And so we do know that there's a waiting list for folks to be in the shelters that Carbondale is providing. We have seen an uptick in requests for services, utilization, I think, at our resiliency center, food pantries, requests for assistance coming from our newcomer population. And so we have done a soft stand-up of our emergency support functions around emergency housing and health and communications. We will be coming to the board fairly soon. We do think we're reaching a tipping point right now. We're working to identify partners. I don't want to talk about those partners publicly yet until they've kind of settled on being available for at least a temporary shelter, so we can increase our capacity. Right now, what we don't want to have happen is have we're already kind of overwhelmed, right, with the number of homeless that we're trying to serve. I think Janelle's doing a good job. I also think if we talk to our law enforcement friends, they'd like a lot more capacity for us to be able to, both in detox and homeless services, to be able to take those 2 o'clock calls or 3 o'clock, calls or the parks, those sorts of things. So as we see this rather large influx, especially as Denver is winding their services down, we're anticipating needing to stand up, at least on a temporary basis, some additional shelter services. We anticipate they will be managed differently than our services for our chronically homeless. But Francie, we're anticipating the next week or two, the board will be seeing some requests coming forward from staff because of those increased demands on services that we're starting to see. I don't know if that was a long-winded way of saying.
Well, I know they had a legal
we're
clinic
seeing.
this, I think, Friday night or Thursday night or something, and I know that in terms of case management, that's one of the things they really need is legal advice on how to stay in the United States, find work, that kind of thing. Mostly find work, get work permits. So how did that go, Lindsay? Were there a lot of people at the clinic? And
I don't know. I was out of town last week, but I can speak just a little bit too. I've been speaking really closely with my Denver counterpart and their emergency operations there and kind of what they're anticipating in 2024. For shelter services alone, they're budgeting $180 million. They've already bought 3 hotels. So, I mean, this is a true, right, this is kind of a true, and we're looking at a very different population of people. And what I'll also, and I'll add the caveat that in talking with their emergency operations, they closed down all congregate shelter and started doing non-congregate. And what that means is congregate is when everybody sleeps in one room together, kind of like what Janelle is doing with our chronically homeless, and have moved to non-congregate, which is hotel rooms, which is why they've bought hotels. They're buying hotels up. Because they have seen a lot of issues come through, right? Of like anywhere from, you know, like drug use and like things like that through these big shelters, sex trafficking, things like that. They were like, we've seen it all, which is why we had to shut it down and we had to move into a non-congregate setting. So I think we have a unique problem that we're gonna need to solve. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that it is gonna start with us making sure people are warm and safe and right and not out there, which is kind of what Denver is doing. They've implemented some interesting policies for us to start thinking about, such as like length of time or length of stay in a shelter. They're allowing single individuals to stay 14 days at a time and families up to 6 weeks, I believe, in these non-congregate settings. And then essentially I said, well, what happens after 14 days? And they said that we're providing them with tents, camping gear. We're showing them where they can camp legally if they choose to stay. If they choose to leave, then we're giving them bus passes. We're kind of helping them on whatever that next step looks like. So it is, you know, we're facing something that could grow and get bigger than what we're already seeing. So that's one of the reasons we've started to stand up, like the soft stand up of the emergency operations, because it's like we should start planning for this.
And I just add the weekly calls are really organized by the state DHS EM, which is their emergency management. There's not really a delicate way to say this. There is no state strategy here. There's no national strategy here. This is really falling then to local governments. Right now, the state has been really helpful through Department of Local Affairs and providing grant funding. That's how Carbondale is funding their shelter. I'd anticipate that any activities that we undertake will be funded on a temporary basis through the same mechanism. They've got probably a few million really that they're working with statewide. You heard the scale, right? And so the state hasn't, again, going back to, we don't have any equity in terms of how services are being provided, and so there's that balancing act that we were talking about earlier. You know, how do we keep people safe and how do we meter the services in such a way that we don't get overwhelmed ourselves? We don't know the right answer to that question, but it's certainly on our minds, and that's why we're looking at these policies from communities that have been through it and trying to plan ahead. I think this problem is going to increase because there is no state or national strategy around really how to do this. And so I think some advocacy at the state level would be helpful. And then in the meantime, it will fall to local communities like us to figure out what level of service is appropriate and that we can provide.
Mayor Toyer, can I ask a question?
I've got Patty up first and then you.
Thanks.
Hold on. Patty, go right ahead, Greg.
Okay, thanks. My first question was just for Janelle on the 90 days residency, or what do you call it, in the community before you can avail of the services. Is that a number that we set, or is that, I guess it's not a statutory number because John just said the state doesn't seem to have much influence there. But I wanted to ask that question. But then also the main point I want to make is we're talking about two different populations of people here. Your chronic homeless that I believe is the problem in the city of Aspen are people that I'd say, I think I've heard it, maybe 97% have either severe addiction, alcohol, or mental health issues. And then we have the migrant population, which is homeless, but they wouldn't be otherwise if they weren't refugees. And we need to distinguish, be very clear with our distinctions between the two and the strategies we use to help them, house them, and, you know, try to help them on their way, whatever way that's going to be. And I just want to make sure that we all understand that, as Francie, I think, alluded to, these aren't the same people, but they exist. And I acknowledge it's shocking to hear that. I think 5 years ago was the last time I checked that we had, 25, roughly cases in the valley. Now we're talking 250 or 260. If the number's grown that dramatically, we really should be paying attention. So I'm going to get to my final question. One is, I know the city has concerns about this, and they're valid, and we should participate however we can in helping to solve this situation, because nobody likes to be accosted by someone. On the city's hand, then on the county side, I got a sense that our overtures to the city to help us with funding on this fell short. Somehow it just didn't seem like it was coming through. And maybe John could articulate this better. I'm trying to figure out how we can help each other. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg.
Does John want to answer the questions about funding, was it?
So
Thanks, Troy.
I think right now, as I understand it, the city is in a process of reevaluating strategies around homeless services. So the funding that had previously been allocated to supporting the services that we've been talking about today, the city is not part of that agreement at this point, and I think you're looking at other alternatives.
Sure, two things. First, that the city was approached to be part of funding the homeless shelter. We had operational and data questions that were unresolved. Until those were resolved, we weren't prepared to bring that to City Council. That meeting was scheduled for that discussion, and the council had some other priorities at that time in October that we decided it was going to be not best to bring this conversation before you right at that time. The second piece of it is that we are absolutely under your direction evaluating strategy, which includes environmental changes to some of our public spaces. So they are less attractive as very long-term hangouts and some of these unwelcome community behaviors for community norms. And so we'll be evaluating whether those funds really need to go towards that work within the city limits versus a small donation, in my view, out of our general fund to this effort. It kind of goes back to, in my view, a lot to what we talk about housing. The city doesn't have a dedicated fund for health and human services, but spends several hundreds of thousands of dollars in this area. And we need to know that they're being effective when we spend them.
Thanks for that.
My turn?
Did you have, yes?
Yeah, I just think everyone should know, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a number of homeless people in this community who don't want our help, who don't want to live in a shelter, who don't want to live in confine, who want to live in the park or under the bushes and the trees and wherever they go, that we cannot get into any of our case management. We try, we reach out, but there are people who just like that lifestyle. So it's kind of out of our control. So that's just something I think everybody needs to be aware of. We're doing the best that we can. The other thing, John, about Carbondale, has Garfield County come to the table yet to talk with us about helping to fund these efforts?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. So I think that's a note of interest, that it's happening in Garfield County, and the rest of the valley is trying to reach out to help these migrants that are in Carbondale. And I did have my first interaction with them at the grocery store. They were their Spanish was very clear. They were very patient with me, and not aggressive or confrontive, but very, very friendly. Yeah.
Can I respond to that?
Well,
when
it
you're
is,
done?
it is a slightly different population than kind of what.
Oh, yeah, oh, I know that, I
Yeah, but-
recognize that, but I don't want people to confuse
No,
them,
absolutely.
yeah.
I get your comments. Francie, I'll come back to you, but.
No rush.
Ward, and then I would like an opportunity for Kim to come up because, sorry, our Chief of Police, Kim Ferber. Because the questions, as I outlined them in the memo for everybody, we've just gotten a good overview of the resources and kind of the county and city relationship. And then, so I want to kind of go back to some of the other questions, and Kim, I think, can really help inform us about how these go on an individual basis. All this keeping in mind that we have 15 minutes left, and we're going to be done with our joint meeting at 6 o'clock. Ward.
Yeah, a couple of things. First, yeah, Kim's probably gonna, Chief Verber's probably gonna address this, that there's no law against public intoxication, but there is certainly a law against harassment and what we can do. People are free to use our public spaces, but the behavior that Bill pointed out, I don't think anybody at this table or in this town want that kind of behavior. And I'm curious from the police department and the sheriff's department if there is an increase in that kind of behavior. I know that I think New Mexico had a housing first approach that in Denver, I think, had the same thing, where it was less expensive for people to give housing than it was to give continuing care. And the emergency room visits by people that need medical attention. And so the housing first approach is something that should be on the table. But another thing is that, I mean, city of Aspen could be stressed if Governor Abbott's next export comes to Aspen. And we're subject to political maneuvers. We've seen that kind of practice going on. But just to point out, it's not just two groups of people, Greg. I think that it's certainly the immigration is one, and but there's a continuity of cases for the homeless. Some are, as Patty, I think, pointed out, some that are just fine with, they don't want to be housed. Some people are functionally homeless. Some people are in between, and the continuity of care and case management, when you go from one level of service to the next, the handoff is important. And I don't think we're certainly not going to solve this issue. All we can do is try to address it. So I don't want to take any more time because everybody else has brought these points up, but yeah, I'm really curious on what the trend is, if there's an uptick in the kind of behavior that Bill brought up.
All right. Chief, if you don't mind, and Bill, if you want to jump in and grab a seat with the mic as well, so you're ready to roll. Anytime you want, right over there. Yeah. You never know.
You can come sit over here with us.
And so I think you heard just a little kind of a good setup from Ward about, what we'd love to hear from you is some of the parameters that you operate under in this space. At the city council table, and Francie, I really appreciate the fact that you don't know about some of the behaviors we're seeing here in Aspen. It's actually a good thing that you don't know about them, but some things are going on. So really just to talk about like how is it handled? We have Connor Park, which is a place where people gather often. What happens?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying we do have really good collaboration with our partners, and the majority of the people that we contact who are involuntarily housed, we find that they are very pleasant and cooperative, and they want us to connect them with services, and so we appreciate our partnerships there. But we do have a small group of people are extremely challenging for law enforcement to navigate, and most of those individuals are not wanting to be housed. They don't want our services. They do often suffer from mental health issues as well as substance abuse. They go hand in hand. And so we have the HSO program that you're all familiar with, our co-responder program. They spend much of their time trying to build rapport with these individuals, right? So consistent contact with them in hopes that eventually they can get them to voluntarily, that's always a lot of the key word here, voluntarily submit to services, right? And so we've had success recently with 4 different individuals that you would consistently have seen last summer at Connor Park. Now, I don't know if that's because of the change in weather or because we're having some breakthrough with some of them, but on occasion, we do see success. Now, for some of the others, they, I like to say, don't want to listen. And so they're very challenging in the community. It's very challenging for law enforcement. They get very frustrated because they want to help these individuals and they're not wanting our help. So since my arrival, I will say that I've had a lot of conversations with the team that once we have an opportunity to warn people and advise them of the law, then we need to start to make the next steps, and that is issuing them summonses. Now, I will say that the majority of the crimes are low-level misdemeanors. With misdemeanor reform, we can't put them in the jail. So that's really a ticket and release situation, which they know. They're very wise to this, but I will say we are, after a number of summonses are being issued to these individuals, we are seeing some accountability in the courtroom. It's low level of accountability, but like I always say, like that will eventually add up over time. We had one fairly serious incident this last summer where one of them did wield a knife and menace somebody. I think you all recall that. And that person we apprehended very quickly, and he was jailed, and there was consequences. We have one other individual who's been very active communicating with all of you and in our community who assaulted officers and was filed with a felony and is being held accountable for that as well. So some of the more serious ones we see that are going into the district court, we're having a little better response from the court on that, but not as much, with all due respect, at the municipal level because they're wanting them to seek services outside of the court processes. Bill, do you want to touch anything on that piece
Actually,
of
the
it?
only update would be we've actually had 5. I
thank you.
updated that number just a little bit ago. And so 5 folks who've recently actually accepted services and are in various stages of detox through working with our PACT and co-responder program.
I might add as well, we have a really close partnership, probably most with Janelle in our setting. But one of the challenges that we have is that so many of these individuals do not want to voluntarily go to detox. And there's nowhere for them to go. And so there is a new emergency commit and an involuntary commit process that the state has implemented, but we're navigating through it. We're learning how to do it. We've been meeting with the ER doctors, Dr. Gallagher and the ambulance, Gabe Muthing, and then our team. And then I have a meeting coming up at the beginning of next month with all of the executives in the area for law enforcement. And we're really trying to set up some better protocols at point of contact so that the team members have a little better of idea what they can do with some of these individuals. But I'll echo what John said is like, there's not anything there. It's tough. It's really tough.
Sam and then Bill.
I was wondering how you guys are dealing with the camping ban lawsuit that's going through like the Boulder courts right now, and if you're even allowed to ticket or arrest people for camping in public spaces.
Yeah, so the one thing that we, advice from the attorney right now is that we're not enforcing the camping. However, if there are other violations, and oftentimes there are when they are camping, then we are enforcing those. We are standing up an unhoused task force in the city. We have our first meeting on Wednesday, and part of that is partnering with the city attorney's office. We're watching very closely because the camping ordinances are going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We anticipate hearing something perhaps in June or July and a lot of the country's waiting to hear from the U.S. Supreme Court on this camping specifically to identify what we can do. I think I mentioned to council we were looking at potentially bringing a revision to the camping ordinance for our community. We've held off on that because we wanted to wait and see what the Supreme Court has to say about that before we do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bill?
Firstly, Kim and Bill, thanks for all you do. I appreciate it. Along the lines of what you were saying, is there different direction we could give you? Are there different policies we could make from, on a municipal level at least? Are there additional resources you need where you think some combination of those three things or more might be able to have a more meaningful impact on the behavior that we're experiencing?
The short answer is yes, and we're working on a plan to come back and ask for resources. It's just not in the police department alone. There's multiple departments impacted by these behaviors and their ability to commit to safe spaces for community members and visitors. And so we'll be bringing that more back as a package for City Council's consideration in an appropriations request.
Please do, it's important to me. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you, Sarah.
If I can add one other thing, I know the conversation around an SOS and versus disbursement is pretty challenging.
What is that?
Safe outdoor spaces is the formal description for what happened out at the Intercept lot during the pandemic.
And I know there's a lot of conversation around that, and it is challenging because is there the potential that if you build a space, will it perhaps create more of an influx versus maybe some of my experience has been with the Metro is knowing where some of these individuals are at, and I'm speaking more of the ones who are committing the crimes and allocating law enforcement resources. That oftentimes I have found that if we know where the area is and we can deploy our resources there, it's a little easier to manage on our part rather than us not knowing where these individuals are at and us just getting calls and continuing to respond to different locations. Because Connor Park is, you're right, in the summer, that seemed to be the location, and we patrolled that regularly. But then when they leave that area, it's like waiting till the phone call comes to kind of figure out maybe perhaps where they went next. And we were aware of some of the concerns that were coming from the thrift store and went there to work with some of the employees there as well. So just another thought I thought I'd add.
Thanks for that. Kelly?
She froze.
No, she's
Yep,
mute.
you're good. Try again.
She's
Oh, that time you did freeze.
frozen and mute.
Mr. Eyes are open.
She's all.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I turned my video off. I will say, I just want to take a moment and really sing the praises of Janelle and Lindsay and all the folks who aren't present here in the West Mountain Health Alliance. And I would just encourage you, as you guys are endeavoring to do your own homeless work, to really lean on the expertise of these folks who have built a regional collaborative from not nothing, but based on all the best practices and all these just super well-known resources to work and be effective. I would hope, that you can draw from them and their experience and expertise, because what they're doing in the region is incredible. And I didn't realize that, I'm concerned that maybe there's a bigger disconnect with the city on all this work than I had realized. I thought that the city was partners at the table in all this. And, I just would really encourage you all to look to the work that they're doing and the infrastructure that they've built for being able to provide case management directly to people up and down the valley, no matter where they are. So I hope you take that into mind and don't reinvent a wheel that I think is going really well. Thank you.
I just would like to respond, Mayor, if I may. Thank you. Kelly and other commissioners, I want you to know we're very familiar with that work and have had multiple conversations with them. I want to be clear, the City of Aspen's direction is about dealing with the immediate tactical issues that are facing our residents and our visitors from folks who are unable or unwilling to seek services and work on a transition. Those folks are impacting quality of life issues, and so the direction given to me by City Council is to work on those immediate tactical needs while these other thought partners and funding works on the structural solution. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, well said. This is multi-layered. There's different folks that are the individuals we're talking about here, and from the city side, we're very much seeing the ones that we're talking about are the cases where somebody doesn't want to seek treatment. They don't want to be in, and they are having an impact on our community, health and safety. Okay. Real quickly, I want to go through this. As I wrote it up in the memo here, we kind of answered these questions. What is the current status of shelter, detox, and case management? We heard about that. How are we handling drinking and aggressive behavior? We've heard about our law enforcement efforts. What efforts are made for the safety, health, and public interactions that we see in our community? Those are being handled, but more importantly, we are embarking on a more rigorous process that will come back to City Council in addressing this issue. And then the last one was who contacts the individuals. It's varied depending on what we're talking about, whether it's detox, whether it's housing, or whether it's infractions in our downtown core, will depend on who is responding and contacting those individuals. The only last thing I think I have as a question or whatever, it sounds to me as if we know these individuals. It sounds to me that everybody has a name to go with their face. And that's important to me. I think that's step one. And we didn't even know if that kind of contact, if that kind of coordination and collaboration was going on. But it sounds to me like absolutely. We're counting them down to 264. We know who's being housed where. We have names that go with each one of them. So I think that's an important first step. And I was seeing Bill shake his head in agreement when he heard that we were going to be having this information come back to us with a strategic plan. So I think for council's side, this has been very informative and helpful. Steve?
I wish I had enough time to tell the whole story of Whitney Justice, who befriended a homeless man by the Paradise Bakery, and over quite a long period of time befriended him, got to know him, helped him. He had mental health issues. He was estranged from his family. His father had died. He had an inheritance coming to him, but his family didn't know where he was. Very interesting story, but he's now living in a house in Crestone that he owns, and Whitney helped him accomplish that. But the point I want to make is that one person helping one other person took one homeless person off the streets of Aspen. And sometimes it takes an incredible amount of human energy to do that. One by one might be how some of these cases are resolved, and some of them probably aren't solvable, but it's a huge issue, and kudos to those who work on it and are able to help the people and help make the problem better.
And that was the guy we all used to see and know, standing on that corner between Paradise and Ralph, by the kiosk there.
Standing man?
It was pretty cool what she did.
Say again, Francie?
You just had a quick thing in sort of closing about mostly about the migrants or the refugees, I should say, who are coming in. I have so many people, they've seen me in the paper and stuff, so they say, well, what are you going to do about it? What is the solution? And I have to say, I don't believe there is a solution. I mean, we don't have housing for our workforce, so how can we have housing for 80 or 120 or 500 or whatever people coming in? So I think, unfortunately, we have to live with the underlying reality that we can't really solve this. Yeah. And it's really a painful reality.
Just approach it with compassion, and it is the best we can do.
Put it on the wicked pile. Yeah. All right, any last comments or questions on this topic? If not, then thank you guys so much. Thank you for
Thank you,
being here
guys.
tonight.
Thanks all.
County, thank you so much for engaging on both these topics. We really appreciate it. We have a couple others that we'll be talking about for our next joint meeting and such, but we so appreciate just getting together with you guys and
Thanks.
hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Great meeting.
That will conclude our joint work session with the BOCC, and we will take just about 4 minutes, and we will commence with the rest of our work session at City Council. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
right. Is it possible to get the attendees on one of those screens? Is Stephen, can I signed in? Is he logged in? Stephen is not.
How about Charlie Tarver?
It said he was gonna be here in Perpet. So do you is Alexandra here? Yes. Okay, and then Julia, Michaela, and Ramona are online right now? Correct? All right, then we will start with kids first. If you'd like, come on up to the table. We have Julia Doxey, Michaela Idammer, and Ramona Brulin, who are joining us virtually. Hey, good luck. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. These are applicants for the Kids First Board, and in Kids First, let me get to taking them out of order. Let's see. Kids First. We are looking for one regular member. We have 4 applicants. Michaela is actually reapplying as she is currently seated with her term ending this month. With that, I just normally start off by asking if everybody that is applying, Michaela, Julia, Ramona, and Alexandra, if you are aware of the roles and responsibilities and the meeting schedule for Kids First. You are familiar with the board and its roles and responsibilities. I see some shakings, heads, and noddings. Okay. All right. Most of you said a lukewarm yes, but all right. That's good enough for me. Let's move on. So I will open this up for council members. First of all, let's go through. Let's have each one of you introduce yourselves, and why don't you tell us what your primary interest is in serving on the Kids First Board? I'm going to start with in room. So Alexandra, go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Allie Berry, and I'm interested in serving the community in this capacity. I've spent my career in education, grew up here, moved back to the Valley a few years ago. And then this past year, now a first-time parent. So having, I think I'm just super interested in the mission of Kids First and want to be able to support it, whether it's on the programmatic side, offering my experience, but also perspective as a parent in the Valley.
Is there anything specific that you've seen of the Kids First Board that you seek to improve?
I think accessibility is interesting to me, and I'd be super interested in, especially with the universal pre-K rolling out in Colorado, what our plans are and kind of informing the community, and I think I know there's challenges just on availability of childcare, especially for infant programs, and so I think I'd love to support, I guess, kind of on the program policy operations where I can.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Ramona. Ramona, same. Would you just introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your interest in the Kids First Board?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ramona Bruland. I have lived here since 2009. I have 2 kids, 4 and 6 years old, and I have 2 step grandkids that are 5 months and almost 13 months old. So they're about to go into the preschool system. I do a lot of volunteer work with Community Foundation. And their focus for the last 12 years has been cradle to career. So a lot of the work we've been doing is 0 to 18, whether it's early childhood, whether it's social emotional well-being with the kids here in our region. I'm also the chair of the development committee, chair of the Giving Network, and I work with you guys at the City of Aspen as a volunteer on your granting committee for arts and culture, giving out your philanthropic funds there. So Kids First is a huge and impressive organization. There's a lot of money going through there, and we're a small and tight-knit community. And I really think we have the potential to make a difference. I mean, Kids First already is making a difference, but, you know, what I would, you know, being on the outside of Kids First, I really would love to participate in the committee and just help with a bit of transparency about what they do, educating the community about all the great stuff they do. I have kids in preschool already, so I get to hear about the wonderful programs Kids First does, like the VIP program for teachers. So I get to hear both sides, from the philanthropy side and the teacher side and the parent side. And I really think there's a lot of potential, but there's also a lot of confusion surrounding what Kids First does. And I would just love to get in there and learn more about what it is they do and what's working great and what's not working so great. So I'm thrilled that you guys are looking for more board members, advisory board members.
Thanks, Ramona. Julia, same questions to you.
Hi, I am Julia Doxey. I work in the Aspen Snowmass area with Coldwell Banker Mason Morse. I lived in the valley for 8 years. And once I had my son and COVID hit, we kind of got pushed out of the valley. It was really, really hard finding childcare as an infant. And then, you know, things just got crazier. And coming back to the valley, you know, this is my home. And so I really wanted to make the move back here. I've been back for 4 months. And one thing that I really wanted to do was, you know, kind of create a pillar of support for my community. And, you know, one of the things I know best is how much we need childcare and how much we need that support. And I've leaned on Kids First in the past, and they're usually my first stop every time that I need help with something childcare related. And I feel like there's still so much missing, and I really want to see how I can help bring creative solutions to the table to help bridge that gap.
Thanks, Julia. Michaela, same questions?
Hi, my name is Michaela Einheimer-Ketpura, and I am currently on the Kids First Advisory Board. And I would love to keep serving on that board because, well, now I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. The first time I applied, I think I was pregnant. It feels like a decade ago because it was kind of everyone was virtual for that meeting. So I would love to keep serving just to kind of, my children go to, well, my 7-year-old is now a second grader. She was in daycare when I applied the first time, but now my 2-year-old is in the programs. And I'm the executive director of Aspen Youth Center. So we serve older kids, but I firmly believe in a full approach, you know, from 0 up. And kids are a passion of mine. It's kind of what I do. And I would love to see, you know, when I joined Shirley Ritter was still in charge. And I have loved seeing this transition. And I would love to keep supporting this transition and seeing it grow. I feel that while it definitely does need to be more transparent, it is getting there. It is working. We're working towards that. It's a big goal to make it more transparent. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure doing it for the past few years. I would love to keep doing it. So,
thank you for that, Michaela. Council members, I'll open it up if you have any questions for specifics. Bill.
No specific questions, but I did want to. Sorry about that. No specific questions. Did want to say, Allie and Julia, nice to meet you both. Thanks to all 4 of you for applying. I'm fortunate to know Ramona and Michaela both fairly well, and have seen the incredible work they both do in our community. So just really wanted to express my gratitude for your participation in this process and being willing to serve on these boards. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions for any of the applicants? Ward?
Well, I have a question overall that there, Stefan Reveal and Jessica Guerrero terms are both up this year. And we only have one regular member available now. And if we have a pulse on if Stefan and Jessica are going to be re-enrolling, or because that's two more members coming up between now and August, there'll be vacancies. Does anybody no answer to that?
Ward's question is around the board composition and seeing that there's one regular member opening now because of Michaela's term ending, and that there are two others in this calendar year. And he's just wondering if anybody has heard signals from either Jessica or Steph, if they care to return to the board, if they're planning on reapplying.
Hi, I'm Megan Monahan. I'm co-director of Kids First. As far as I know, Stefan and Jessica are both planning on reapplying for the board.
Thank you for that.
That's good for us. I guess a question to all the applicants. Well, Michaela, I know the answer to this, but have any of you been to Kids First meetings? Attended meetings?
I have not. I've had many conversations with Megan and with Shirley a few years back, but I haven't been to one of the meetings. I didn't fully know that that those were open, but I've learned through this process that they are, which is great.
Thank you. Ramona?
Yeah, same. I get the notifications every time there's a meeting because I somehow signed up for them, but I didn't know they were open to the public. So no, I've never actually attended one.
Thank you.
Is that a reason in the background there?
Yeah. Julia, have you attended a Kids First board meeting?
I have not, no.
Thank you. Thanks, Ward. John?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to all four of you, Michaela, Julia, Ramona, and Allie. You're all very highly qualified, and I'm really grateful to all four of you for applying for this open board seat. This might be a difficult decision for us. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Ward?
Yeah, a question, what's working and what's not working? I heard some accessibility, transparency, confusion. So I'm just curious of the applicants, what they think is working with Kids First, and where's there room for improvement?
I'm going to go in reverse order. And Michaela, we'll actually start with you since you're on the board now. If you can offer anything that you see that is working well or needs improvement, that'd be great.
Well, I think Megan and Nancy are working really, really well. And I think it's been a really interesting transition and a good transition. And it's nice because Shirley still is around to, I've talked with her a few times since she retired, but it's, it's like a new, what's the word I'm looking for? A new era at Kids First. And I think that is working really well. But it is a process and things don't change overnight. But in my experience in the meetings I've been to, I feel that the effort is to make things clearer for the parents, for the people who need these services, for the teachers who need or want trainings. It's a process, and I think it's all moving in the right direction. And so that's really, really positive.
Thank you. Julia, any specifics that you know of at this time?
So for me, I think it's really hard to get information about what's going on, what's available. And so for me as a parent, we're always kind of scrambling. What are the resources that are available to us? Who do we call? Like, what do I do to fix this problem? And I think we need, you know, to have some more support available and have these resources just kind of put out there so that the public knows exactly what's available to them, who they can go to solve these issues. And I feel like, you know, whenever I'm looking for childcare all over again, it's just like, you know, you needed to apply a year ago. Like when I was 5 months pregnant and I called and it was like, oh, well, you needed to apply a year ago. I didn't know I was even going to be pregnant then. So I think, I don't know, it's always been tough and there hasn't been a lot of great solutions available. And it's been really hard to kind of stay positive through that process as a parent.
Thank you, Julia. Ramona, any specifics about room for improvement or things that are well?
Yeah, I hear the two new co-directors are actually out listening to needs really well, so I'm happy to hear that. You know, I mentioned the VIP program earlier, where the teachers can go get additional education and certifications and get paid for it, which is fantastic. You know, it's such a big budget that I just wonder where some of the funds are going and are they wisely spent. So, you know, I'd love to learn more about, you know, the financing and where it's going specifically. But, you know, there's a lot of good programs already in place. Is it a good, you know, are the funds being used to the best of their abilities would be what I'd hope to contribute to.
Thank you for that.
You're being photobombed.
Oh, in the back.
Allie?
Yeah, I think these things come down to quality and access. And actually, I think when we first spoke, and before I had a child, I came in through the lens of quality. And I've worked in a lot of school design work, mostly in the high school space, though. And so there was this opening at the Yellow Brick, and that's what we were connected about originally. And I was considering actually working with someone to design a new program. Really thinking what, you know, just kind of with quality in mind, what can we do? There were many reasons why we didn't go down that path, but I think through that experience, it was also a reminder of just the constraints, and I think especially in this community, to just attract, retain great talent. It's a challenge for those that are working so hard to do that. But housing and all the things you guys are thinking about all the time. But I think there's really great work underway to support. I think a big thing is supporting the leaders of these programs. And I know that that's what Kids First is already doing, and I think that is a big part of the work. Access, I think, has become, I did not realize that until going through it as a parent. I have, since I was pregnant, and I have a spreadsheet, and I'm a very more of a type A organized, but I still have a spreadsheet and calendar reminders, and I'm taking the resources that are on the website, but I'm having to make a spreadsheet, follow up, note the phone calls. We'll spend literally full days almost trying to get in touch and know what's going on. I observed probably 6 different programs where they said, you're over 100 on the wait list, but we said, well, we still want to go see it. And then actually we've heard back from a number of programs that they do have availability. I think there's great work underway. I think using data, creating synergy and more communication between program leaders. So again, I think a lot of it could come down to thinking programmatically on connecting program leaders and just finding greater efficiency and making things more transparent. And then the last thing I'll say is I do think the universal pre-K and rolling that out across Colorado and into this valley will probably be something I know everyone's already thinking about, and there's work there, but as a new program too, I think there's a lot of work that we can do, or there's an opportunity for how we message that and communicate that to families and educate them on that process.
Thank you so much for that. Ramona, you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for jogging my memory on something. But I love how Kids First is really working to look at the wait lists in preschools, because there are not only kids that are on 4 or 5 wait lists, there are kids that are 12 or 16 years old that are still on preschool wait lists. So I really appreciate how Kids First is diving into a database to really try and clean that up and see real numbers and real data. That would be super helpful with this whole with what Kids First does in this community. So, yeah, there's so much that you guys do, so.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, you guys are all the best for applying and all the best served people in this world, so I really appreciate that. My question's actually for Megan, saying we have 4 applicants and only 1 spot, and I was wondering if you had any advice for the 3 that don't get the spot, how they can contribute and really be a part of this, because I would have them all.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I guess my advice would be come to our meetings. They're open to the public. We have them over Zoom. We are doing them quarterly now, but we would welcome you as members of the community to participate in the meetings. So even if you're not chosen, we would love to have your input, feedback, support, ideas. We love, new ideas, and it sounds like all of you are really smart and have a ton of expertise to hopefully support us with. And then thanks to all of you for being so willing to support your community and support us.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate your time this evening, and we will let you know very soon or follow up with you with any further questions.
I'd like to thank you all, but full disclosure that my wife does serve on this board.
All right, thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are going to go to our next one. We're going to do open space and trail. We have Adam McCurdy, Julie Hardman, Howie Mallory, and Charlie Tarver. Charlie, come on up. Unless you don't want to, because we're interviewing you for another board as well, so it is your choice. Do we have our virtuals joining us? Are Julie and Howie there?
Okay, housekeeping question.
Sure.
How many people do you have for HPC?
1.
Okay.
1 opening.
Okay. How many people for this board?
4.
I will resign. I'll take myself.
You'll
back.
wait.
There's 4 applicants, but 3 positions, Charlie. There's only 1 open position on HPC.
Right, but there's 4 applicants for HPC?
One applicant for HPC.
1 applicant, 1 opening?
Him.
Yeah.
Got it.
So, if there's 3 and 3, I will bow out.
Thank you, Charlie.
That's cool, and we'll keep you in consideration. If this board
No,
was
I'll go
to,
through it anyway. I'll go through it anyway.
if this board was to say, like, you know what, no, tell that Charlie Tarver he's stuck. Yeah, so
Continue.
you're not disqualified. Okay.
Speak into the microphone.
Come on. Okay, let's see, let's go down here. As I was just saying, guys, we have got 4 applicants for open space and trails. And as of right now, we have got 3 positions.
Julia's online.
Okay, we got her back?
Yep.
All right, we'll take her over there on this other screen as soon as we can get her. One joint member, 2 regular members. Let me remind you that Howie is a joint member and reapplying for that position. And then we have Julie also is a current member who is reapplying. Adam is a current member who is reapplying. And Charlie is in consideration, but he is also up for an HPC position. So we'll keep him in consideration. The first question, and really it would go to Charlie. Are you aware of the roles and responsibilities and the meeting schedule for the open space and trails?
No.
Okay. With that, then, I would go around. We have 4 applicants here. Would you please just introduce yourself and tell us about your interest in applying or reapplying? I will start in room with Adam.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for giving all of us the time today. My name's Adam McCurdy. I've lived in town since 2008. I work at the Aspen Center for Environmental Studies as the Forest and Climate Programs Director there. I have a background in environmental science as well as climate decision making. I am also an avid user of our open space and trails and parks. I think that it serves an incredible amenity for the community. It's part of what makes our community such a great place to live. That you can have access to parks and trails literally out your back door. I remember moving here and moving into a Hunter Creek condo and realizing that the Hunter Creek Trail was right there, and it pretty much blew my mind. So I've been in love with the system ever since. I think that our parks and open space also serves an important role in terms of protecting wild places for wild things. So considering the plants, animals, biodiversity that our open space and trails provide habitat for. The city open space and trails and parks is relatively small, but they are important connection points, and we do have interest in larger areas, including North Star Smuggler and Sky Mountain Park, which are all super important, larger open spaces that provide a lot of habitat. I've really enjoyed being on the board. I'd love to continue being on the board. I think we have a lot of important things that are going on right now that I'd like to keep involvement with.
Thanks, Adam. Charlie, just a quick answer for you. Your interest in parks and open space and trails, open space and trails.
I have a house. I sleep there. I live outside. Since, I don't know, 84. Pretty much found me every trail, every open space there was. I guess I'm more interested in, I'm good at getting things done. From going back to Pickens County when we went from 15,000 square foot houses to 5,750. Marcella Larson and I wrote that during planning and zoning in the county commission in the mid-90s. So it's the bigger thing of how does it save open space? By getting it done in a logical, understanding way where I can relate to the guy who's coming in with rights versus what we really want in this community, which is to leave it like we found it. The reason that Aspen is Aspen has nothing to do with anything any of us, Pepke, anybody ever did. It's what's around us. It's on the White River National Task Force. When we redid with Howie, we rewrote the rules for the White River National Forest, which is around Pickens County. Redid the Pickens County. Worked on several things inside the city where we transferred development rights. That came in with Marcel Larson and I also. Where we got development where it needed to be, and what it allows for is open space to exist. So I'm more of getting things from land that is going to be developed, how to get it developed correctly in a way that helps preserve what we consider prime open space, which is why we live here.
Thanks, Charlie. Howie Mallory, if you can hear me, can you just give us a brief answer about your interest in, introduce yourself and a brief interest in the Open Space and Trails Board?
Hi, I'm Howie Mallory. I live at 211 East Hallam Street in Aspen. And it's a great pleasure to be here. I've served on the board, the City Open Space Board, since its inception over 20 years ago, and it's been a pleasure to represent the city, as well as I serve on the Pickens County Open Space and Trails Board. So I'm a liaison, if you will, between both open space programs. We have a great history of partnership on projects both inside the city, if you will, as well as outside the city boundaries. What I've really have thought about regarding reapplying is to bring to the board's attention that we're in the midst of some really significant changes and outcomes for the city and the county, particularly for the city with respect to connectivity of our trail system, the trails that function as part of our city's hub and spoke program, the city being the hub and the spokes going up the various valleys as we have put in improved bike paths on safety on Castle Creek going up to the music school. We're planning to put a new platform going up Maroon Creek Road past the high school and the school campuses. And we're discussing very seriously, and I think we should very positively pursue the connectivity out to the Brush Creek Intercept lot by looking very carefully at installing the bridges to span the Roaring Fork to the Rio Grande Trail, both from the Intercept lot and from the ABC. That I think is going to make a big change in terms of our non-vehicular mobility, which the city is very proud to be a part of. As Adam talked about, wildlife protection is very important. Maintaining wildlife habitat's critical for us to accomplish our mission. I will point out to the board that we are, the council, if you will, that we're in the process of trying to determine the wildlife impacts, wildlife status of Deer Hill, which is squeezed in between the existing Burlingame housing and the proposed lumberyard housing. Those are huge impacts on a designated wildlife space that the city's participated in. A few years back, jointly with the county, we spent several $100,000 to acquire part of the Solner property in Aspen, at the edge of Aspen by the Burlingame housing area. So those, right, for the moment, are two of the areas that I'd like to continue working on. I see them. Their completion and implementation is important for us to carry out our mission.
Thanks, Howie. Julie, same questions to you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We got you.
Okay, great. Thanks for accommodating us that are virtual tonight. I have lived in Aspen for 28 years, and I live and work right in Aspen. I rarely cross Main Street, my daily commute, but I have been serving on the Open Space Board for the last 4 years, along with Adam and Howie. And I have the same sentiments as Adam, as I would like to continue being on the board. I love Aspen. I have a niece and nephew growing up here. We utilize all the parks for kids and dogs. I also do events for the city, and I'm very passionate about, preserving the space that we have, as well as utilizing it for our local community.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate that. All right, with that, if there's any council members that have specific questions of any of the applicants, I'll remind you that 3 of these applicants are currently serving and are reapplying. So anybody with a specific that they care for?
No specific questions, just another voice of appreciation for all of you for serving and being willing to serve. And for the 3 of you that are currently on the board, thanks for all the great work that you do on open space and trails. I certainly enjoy and benefit from those amenities in our community and appreciate them. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Any specific questions for any of the applicants?
I just have a question. We have 1 regular joint member and 2 regular members.
Correct.
So the joint member, BOCC has to appoint as well?
They would approve, yes.
Okay. And Howie, you've been serving in that liaison type of position for a couple of dogs' lives?
Well, yeah, I have been serving in that. My continuation on the county's Open Space and Trails Board expires in April, so I'm reapplying in March to continue in that role.
Thank you.
Thank you, Howie. All right, I only have one question, and this is maybe too specific, but hey, Howie, that
Yes.
connectivity, Rio Grande to the Brush Creek, are you fully supportive of it? Do you think that is a great transit connection, or do you think that is a project that is too large for its application?
It's a really good question. It's certainly a question that come up when we discuss the funding requirements to make it happen. I don't see it primarily, Tori, as a transit-only solution. I really see it as part of a continuation of our various of our trail network system. It will serve for some commuter benefits, there's no doubt about it, and which would be a positive. But I think when we project out in 25 years and that's installed, the connection to be able to, frankly, ride from the city. Remember, e-bikes are going to be much more prevalent than they have been in the past and are continuing to grow. If we have a better connection to the intercept lot, that will also make accessible by bicycle the Cozy Point property that we spent, Julie and Adam and I have spent a considerable amount of time trying to improve. And this is a city resource. It's a little bit restricted in terms of its non-vehicular access. So I think in the long run, this will be a real plus for the community.
Thanks for that. Thank you guys all for making time in this evening to meet with us, talk with us. Thank you for the service that you've already done and you're interested in continuing service. Thank you guys. We will let you know very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a wonderful night.
Thank
Charlie,
you.
stay right where you are.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Howie. Thanks, Adam. I recognize that address. Your Puppy Smith Street. I know where you live.
On the campus down.
Thank you, guys. The next board that we're going to be talking about is HPC. This is an opportunity. We have one opening and one applicant. Charlie is here. He's already told you a little bit about himself and why he thinks he's a good candidate. Hey, Charlie, I just want to start it off by saying, what do you think? HPC, do you look at this as an opportunity to make some needed improvement to how the board is operating, or do you see this as an opportunity to be a strong advocate and keep the good work going forward?
B.
Thank you. I'll ask other members of the board if they have any specific questions around HPC.
An opening statement?
No, we had one. You make things happen. I'm sorry, he gets things done. That's actually how he said it. Bill, go right ahead.
Well, Charlie, if you do have something you want to say, in my view, please feel free, but
1989, first board I sat on was a neighborhood advisory committee. How to build bike paths and connection of trails that Howie was talking about. We wrote them down on a piece of paper. This is like Hans Grauminger and Carl Fragman from Carl's. And we drew out this crazy stuff that we thought, these are things that have to be done, these are things we'd like to be done, and in 50 years we'll see this. And what's amazing is when you get to be old enough, you get to see it all being done. And it's so awesome when you're riding on trails and going, we kind of drew this in pencil on a maybe crayon thing. Very cool. As far as HPC, what we have here is the most wonderful place in the whole world. Flat out, full stop. I'd like to keep it that way. And most of you know, well, no, 3 of you know, I sat on boards all through the 90s. We had like 30 hours a week on boards. I then kind of hit my head, went to the hospital for a while, took some time off. Now it's time to come back. So this is more of my reentry into community service in our valley and open space. And I got married at the Wheeler, walked to the Jerome for my honeymoon.
I was there.
I was there.
So the old stuff's pretty good.
thank you. More specifically, so the role on HPC, a lot of the role is evaluating specific development applications, and they're complex, right? There's a lot of plans to read and renderings to decipher, and site plans and elevations and et cetera, et cetera. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in understanding and deciphering those plans?
I bought a building in town in the view plan of the Wheeler, so I understand a little bit about that. What I've always been very good at is understanding your point of view and his point of view. Don't really care about either of them, but I understand both of them. I understand why you're saying what you say. And I understand why he's saying what he says. And I can figure out how to put the two together. And so that stuff's easy. I believe, to me.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's an understanding, when you sit on a board, what's really important is understanding what the person's really trying to tell you. And to truly understand his side of it. I grew up in a house where they said, my dad would say, what color's the wall? And you say white. He says, tell me why it's black. And you give the 4 best reasons why it was black. And so I'll argue with anything on either side. So understanding both sides has an advantage to understanding what both people say. I don't care one way or the other. Let's just figure out the right way to get it done.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks.
Any other specific questions for Charlie regarding HPC?
Charlie, I think I know the answer to this because I've known you for quite a while, but oftentimes at the console table, we're presented with a story and then an application. And sometimes people give us a story and we're sold by the story. Are you a story man or?
I do not believe in room opinion. I've sat in, too many times to sit in a room like this, there'll be 42 people in here. 39 of them will tell you that you're crazy for doing it, it should be read. It's been read forever, it should be read. That's the room opinion. You represent 6,000 people. 3,000 of them may think red's terrible. And that's what you have to know. The story is, it's not even the icing on the cake, it's the little floral leafy things. It's cute, it's nice, and it has a person, you have to understand it. But there's 6,000 other people who may not be interested in that story. So you have to care enough to hear their story, to listen to them, to understand it, then put it in context. That's your story. There's 6 of you. This is why we came up with a rule that says you have to be able to have a fire escape. And that represents everybody, whoever has been caught on fire, might catch on fire, or has a candle on their cake. So there's a bigger, no, I'm not big on stories. They're cute, but it's not what it's about.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Charlie.
That's my story.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks.
We're
Don't
gonna
try to get 100 miles per hour on your bike, all right?
Yeah, right. We are going to move to the LLA. We have Ashley Gilroy and Ben Rose. Guys, come on up to the table if you could.
We're the 2 applicants and the ones that showed up in person.
I also applied to another board as well, so I'm
correct.
Happy to do either one to make sure that everyone that applied can get a board.
All right. So, the first question is, do you know about the roles and responsibilities in the meeting schedule for the LLA?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Ashley, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us why you're interested in serving on the LLA?
Sure. My name is Ashley Gilroy, and I became interested in this position because I read Bill's emails. But no, literally. I had a cannabis facility in Las Vegas, and I worked daily with the Nevada Department of Taxation. I was head of compliance and then interim COO of a 50,000 square foot facility. So I learned the ins and outs of that business, and also learned a lot and how to do temp permits, what that process looked like, who the best applicants were, because I wanted to make sure that our facility qualified. And also, when you have to work with the Department of Taxation, it also kind of goes over into liquor. And because oftentimes they model cannabis after liquor in Las Vegas. So I gained a lot of experience, and I gotta tell you, Las Vegas is a really good training ground. I was there for 3 years and became a full-time Aspen resident in 2020. Have been involved, and Aspen's been a part of my life since 2006. And I feel like I could add a really interesting perspective to this committee, and I could also add a little bit of diversity to it as well.
How long have you been living back in Aspen?
4 years.
Thank you. Ben, same, would you introduce yourself and just tell us why you're interested in the LLA?
Sure. My name is Ben Rose. I'm a lawyer in Aspen. Like Ashley, I also get Bill's email, and I did see the opening. I also saw them in the newspaper as well. So thank you guys for advertising them. But, I applied for 2 boards. The other board I applied for was was regarding the Building Code of Appeals. I think I was interested in boards that seemed kind of legalistic to some extent, where I would be applying law and legal analysis. Both these boards fit that description. But again, I'm, in the interest of everybody who applied getting the opportunity to serve, I'd be happy to defer and be on the other board. I think I would enjoy both probably equally.
Thanks for that. Any specific questions for the applicants that are sitting in front of you? Bill, go right ahead.
Thanks to both of you, Ashley and Ben. I know both of them well and think they'd be wonderful on this board. Ben, for whatever it's worth, I think you'd be a better fit on this board, not because of any of the things you described, but the Building Code Board of Appeals basically never meets. So it's a fairly unfulfilling board. Important that it exists for the rare occasion that it does come up, but this is a much more active board and you'd be able to contribute in a more meaningful way to our community on a regular basis. So for that reason, I personally would rather see you on this one than the other one, just because you'd have something to do.
Thanks, Bill.
But lucky to know you both, and thank you for applying.
Thanks, Bill. Any other specific questions for these applicants?
Well, you can go where, we have a policy, or we've tried to have a policy that you only serve on one board. And so, what would your preference be between the two?
Sure. Again, I know Ashley as well. I don't feel like competing against her. If it wasn't the, if she wasn't applying, I'd probably prefer this board, but given that she is, I do prefer the idea, unless she'd be interested in the other board as well. Because I'm interested by the legal aspects of it, and certainly a board that meets more is more appealing to me. Something that tackles more media issues is more appealing to me. So as Bill described it, this board does sound more appealing for that reason.
Well, you're in luck because there are two applicants in two positions.
Oh, terrific. That works great then.
So does it matter to you if you're a regular member or an alternate? I'll pass that out to both of you, and I'll just preface this by saying I've served on boards in both positions and rarely see that there's any difference between the two until it comes down to voting, and in most cases it's consensus. But do you have a preference between being an alternate or a regular?
Sure, regular.
Thanks, Ward.
I think anyone would say regular, but I think that getting the opportunity to contribute is, and serve is important,
Yeah, it's paramount.
That's the attitude.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming in person tonight. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your interest in serving on boards. As I always say, our volunteer boards and commissions are part of what makes Aspen so special and solid as a community, because we have people taking part in their community. So thank you for your interest. We will be giving you notification as soon as we can.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks
Thank you so
guys.
much. Stay
Would you
there.
like me to stay? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that does bring us to the last board, and Ben is an applicant for this as well. This is the Building Code Board of Appeals. And did you say that Stephen did not? So Stephen's not on.
But there is one caller. Do you want us to allow them to talk to see if that is Stephen? Because it doesn't identify them.
Yes, that'd be great if you could actually ask them to let us know who they are. Would be wonderful. And it just might be him.
You can let them know right now.
Hi, we have a caller that is calling into the meeting this evening. Are you there? Do you care to identify yourself?
Mysterious.
Is that Stephen? Stephen, are you the caller this evening? Are they're not muted, but they're on a phone line?
So they're on a phone line. I've asked them to unmute and allowed them to talk.
And on a phone line, is there a command to unmute, or is there an unmute?
Yeah, you have to go into the app. There should be a big circular button in the middle. You just press it and it should allow you to talk.
All right. We're going to continue with this, and we will catch up with Stephen or the caller when we can. So this is the Building Code Board of Appeals. This is actually looking for 3 regular members. And as Bill said, the meetings of this are sporadic at best. Because it is an appeal board, it only hears things on appeal. You guys just got an introduction to Ben, so are there any other questions for Ben as it relates to the Building Code Board of Appeals?
I just have one question, that Stephen Knipe was a longtime employee of the city. He retired. I think he came out of retirement, and I'm just wondering if he's re-retired and no longer an employee of the city.
We will find out, because you're right, he was, I don't think it's current, but there was talk about him continuing some service. So we will find out to make sure that there's not a conflict there.
Okay.
Some contract work or something.
Yeah. Any other questions for Ben at this time? Great. Good job.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks again for coming out.
Very articulate on that board interview.
And thank you for letting us have a few options around your appointment. So we appreciate you, and we'll be letting you know very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ben.
Thanks for making the effort.
All right, guys. That concludes our board and commission interviews for this evening, which is also the end of our agenda for tonight. We thank you very much, and thank you, of course, to GrassRoots. We will remind you again that tomorrow we are scheduled for a regularly scheduled meeting, which means that public comment is available at the beginning of our meeting. Please feel free to join us down here at City Hall at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening.
Good times.